In recent years, the name Jeffrey Epstein has become synonymous with secrecy, power, and unanswered questions. Long after his death, new documents, images, and videos continue to surface, not offering clear answers, but raising deeply unsettling concerns. What makes these releases especially disturbing isn't what they explicitly prove, but what they quietly suggest. Photographs with no captions, videos without context, familiar faces appearing in places they later claimed to have never been. For many of the public figures seen in these materials, no crimes have been proven. Some deny knowing Epstein well. Others admit association, but reject any implication of wrongdoing. And that distinction matters. Still, the optics are impossible to ignore. These images come from Epstein's estate and official document releases, preserved moments showing how closely some of the world's most influential celebrities, politicians, and business leaders orbited one man whose crimes would later shock the world. This isn't about guilt by association. It's about transparency, power, and accountability. Because when evidence lacks context, silence fills the gaps. And silence has a way of making people uneasy. Tonight, we're examining the most disturbing photos and videos connected to the Epstein files. Not to accuse, but to understand why these images continue to haunt the public long after the facts are supposedly known. Proceed with caution. Number 10. Woody Allen. Images without context. Questions without closure. When photographs from Jeffrey Epstein's estate were released by members of the U.S. House Oversight Committee, one of the familiar faces that immediately drew attention was Woody Allen. In the images, Allen appears alongside Epstein and other powerful figures, including Larry Summers. On their own, the photos show nothing illegal. Yet, their existence reopened long-standing discomfort surrounding Allen's public image. Allen has always been a controversial figure, even before Epstein's name became globally notorious. His marriage to Soon-Yi Previn, the adopted daughter of his former partner Mia Farrow, permanently altered how many people viewed him. More serious are the accusations made by his adopted daughter, Dylan Farrow, alleging sexual abuse during her childhood. Allen has consistently denied those allegations, and he has never been criminally convicted in relation to them. Still, public opinion has remained divided for decades. The Epstein photos added another layer, not of evidence, but of optics. Seeing Allen in Epstein's orbit unsettled many observers, especially given Epstein's later exposure as a serial sex trafficker. Critics argue that context matters. Powerful men gathering around Epstein before his crimes were fully known still raises legitimate questions about judgment, proximity, and awareness. Allen, for his part, has denied any inappropriate relationship with Epstein. In interviews, he described Epstein as charming and claimed he never saw him in the presence of underage girls. At the same time, Allen once compared Epstein to Dracula in a birthday letter, a remark some later viewed as unsettling in hindsight. What makes Allen's inclusion in the Epstein files disturbing is not proof of wrongdoing, but convergence. A man whose career was already clouded by unresolved allegations, appearing in visual records connected to one of the most infamous sex crime scandals in modern history. For supporters, the photos prove nothing. For critics, they reinforce discomfort that never fully faded. In the Epstein files, Woody Allen's presence doesn't answer questions. It amplifies them. And in cases like this, unanswered questions often linger longer than facts. Number 9. Alan Dershowitz. Legal defense, moral fallout. Unlike many names that appear in the Epstein files, Alan Dershowitz was not simply photographed near Jeffrey Epstein. He was directly involved in his legal defense. Dershowitz, one of America's most famous constitutional attorneys, represented Epstein in 2006 during negotiations that led to a controversial non-prosecution agreement. That deal allowed Epstein to plead guilty to lesser state charges while avoiding federal prosecution, an outcome that later became one of the most criticized plea bargains in U.S. legal history. When Epstein's crimes became fully public years later, Dershowitz's role came under intense scrutiny. Photographs released from Epstein's estate showed Dershowitz standing alongside his former client, Epstein wearing a Harvard sweatshirt, a detail that unsettled critics given Dershowitz's decades-long career teaching at Harvard Law School. To many, the image symbolized not just association, but influence. Dershowitz has forcefully rejected any implication of wrongdoing. He has repeatedly stated that he never participated in Epstein's crimes, was never present with underage girls, and has called allegations against him total defamation. He has also argued that the Epstein discourse represents guilt by association and a modern form of public McCarthyism. However, critics draw a distinction between criminal guilt and moral responsibility. While Dershowitz has not been convicted of any Epstein-related crime, his legal work undeniably helped Epstein avoid harsher consequences at a critical moment. Survivors and advocacy groups argue that the plea deal silenced victims and delayed justice, regardless of its technical legality. This is where Dershowitz's inclusion in the Epstein files becomes especially troubling. He isn't just a face in a photo. He's part of the mechanism that allowed Epstein to remain free. Whether one views Dershowitz as a zealous defense attorney doing his job, or as someone who enabled a predator through legal power, depends largely on perspective. But the Epstein documents ensure that his role will remain part of the historical record, debated, dissected, and deeply polarizing. In the Epstein story, Alan Dershowitz represents a different kind of disturbance, not secrecy, but legality colliding with morality. Number 8. Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg. Power, proximity, and the Epstein network. When photos from Jeffrey Epstein-related materials were released by the U.S. Department of Justice, one image stood out not because of what it showed, but because of who was in the room. Among the attendees at a 2015 dinner party Epstein reportedly attended were Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg. On the surface, the photograph documents a single moment: wealthy and influential individuals gathered at a private event. There is no allegation of criminal conduct in the image itself, no suggestion of illegal activity. And importantly, neither Musk nor Zuckerberg has been accused of crimes connected to Epstein. So why did the photo unsettle so many people? Because it reinforced the scale of Epstein's access. For years, Epstein cultivated relationships with the ultra-wealthy and ultra-powerful. Not merely celebrities, but individuals capable of reshaping global systems. Musk and Zuckerberg, through Tesla, SpaceX, Meta, and Facebook, have profoundly influenced technology, communication, and public discourse. Seeing Epstein seated at the same table as them underscores how deeply embedded he was within elite networks. What intensified scrutiny were Epstein's own claims. In emails later revealed, Epstein suggested that the guest list included other major figures in the tech world, such as Reid Hoffman and Peter Thiel. Whether all those individuals were present is debated, but the broader implication remains. Epstein positioned himself as a connector, someone who facilitated introductions among the world's most influential people. Both Musk and Zuckerberg have previously stated that they had no meaningful relationship with Epstein. Musk has denied ever visiting Epstein's island or being involved in his crimes. Zuckerberg has not publicly commented extensively on Epstein, though Meta has stated there was no wrongdoing or special relationship. Still, public discomfort persists, not because of evidence, but because of optics. The Epstein case has reshaped how people view proximity to power. In an era of misinformation and elite distrust, images like this are interpreted through suspicion rather than neutrality. Critics argue that even brief associations raise questions about judgment. Supporters counter that wealthy individuals inevitably cross paths in elite circles, especially before Epstein's full criminal profile was widely known. What makes this entry disturbing isn't accusation, it's realization. Epstein wasn't operating on the margins. He wasn't hidden away from influence. He was seated comfortably among those shaping the future. For many viewers, that's the most unsettling part. Not what Musk or Zuckerberg did, but how close Epstein was to the centers of modern power, without triggering alarm. Number 7. Kevin Spacey. Allegations, acquittals, and uncomfortable images. Few Hollywood careers collapsed as dramatically as that of Kevin Spacey. Once regarded as one of the most accomplished actors of his generation, Spacey's public image changed overnight in 2017, when multiple men accused him of sexual misconduct. Though several cases were dismissed or ended without conviction, the allegations permanently altered how the public viewed him. Studios cut ties, projects vanished. His reputation never recovered, regardless of legal outcomes. Against that backdrop, Spacey's appearance in Epstein-related materials drew immediate attention. One widely circulated image from 2002 shows Spacey visiting the Churchill War Rooms in London, alongside former U.S. President Bill Clinton and Ghislaine Maxwell, who was later convicted of sex trafficking offenses connected to Epstein. The photo itself documents a historical tour, not wrongdoing, but context reshaped its interpretation. Spacey has denied having a relationship with Epstein and has stated that he never visited Epstein's private island. He has emphasized that not remembering meeting Epstein is very different from denying criminal involvement, and he has repeatedly said he was never part of Epstein's crimes. Legally, that matters. However, public reaction rarely separates legality from pattern. To many observers, Spacey's inclusion in the Epstein files felt less surprising than other names, not because of proof, but because of existing mistrust. The combination of unresolved allegations, proximity to Maxwell, and Epstein's later exposure created an association that proved difficult to ignore. This is where Spacey's case becomes especially complicated. Unlike others on this list, Spacey has faced accusations independent of Epstein. Those allegations failed to result in criminal convictions, but they reshaped public perception. When his name appeared in Epstein-related contexts, it didn't start a controversy, it reinforced one. Supporters argue that Spacey has been punished beyond what the justice system imposed. Critics argue that acquittal does not equal exoneration in the court of public trust. What makes the Epstein images disturbing is not what they prove, but how they intersect with an already fractured narrative. Kevin Spacey may not be guilty of Epstein's crimes, but in the public mind, his presence in the files deepened an unease that was already there. And in scandals defined by secrecy, perception often becomes as powerful as fact. Number 6. Brett Ratner. Old allegations, new images, renewed scrutiny. When photos connected to the Epstein files were released, one of the most debated names to resurface was Brett Ratner. Ratner, best known for directing the Rush Hour films, had already retreated from Hollywood years earlier following multiple sexual assault allegations made against him in 2017. Those accusations, while never resulting in criminal convictions, effectively ended his mainstream directing career. The Epstein-related images reopened that chapter. In photographs released by the Department of Justice, Ratner appears at a social gathering alongside Chris Tucker, who starred in Ratner's most famous films. Tucker has not been accused of wrongdoing related to Epstein and has not been implicated in any crimes connected to the case. Still, the image drew attention because of Ratner's presence and because of who else appeared nearby. Most unsettling to many observers was Ratner's appearance in images with Jean-Luc Brunel, a longtime Epstein associate who was later charged with sexual offenses involving minors, and who died by suicide in prison in 2022. In one widely circulated photo, Ratner is seen embracing a shirtless Brunel. The image itself shows no criminal act, but its symbolism proved disturbing, given what later emerged about Brunel's role in Epstein's network. Ratner has denied any improper relationship with Epstein. In interviews, he has stated that he did not know Epstein well and that the photographs were taken at social events he attended with his then-fiancée. He has argued that photos alone cannot establish guilt or intent, a point echoed by supporters who warn against retroactively criminalizing association. Critics counter that context matters. Ratner's career had already been derailed by multiple women accusing him of sexual misconduct, including harassment and assault. Although he has denied the allegations and no criminal verdict was reached, the pattern contributed to a perception problem. When Epstein-related images surfaced, they didn't create suspicion from scratch. They amplified existing doubt. What makes Ratner's appearance in the Epstein materials particularly disturbing is convergence. A filmmaker accused by multiple women appearing socially with a convicted sex offender and an Epstein associate forms a narrative that feels troubling, even if it falls short of proof. This is the tension that defines much of the Epstein archive. The images don't establish crimes, they establish proximity. And in a scandal defined by power-protecting abuse, proximity itself has become a source of unease. For Brett Ratner, the Epstein files didn't rewrite his story. They reinforced why his reputation never recovered. Number 5. Michael Jackson. Icon, acquittal, and enduring suspicion. Few names carry as much cultural weight as Michael Jackson. By the time Jeffrey Epstein's name became globally infamous, Jackson's legacy was already deeply divided. He had been acquitted in court of child molestation charges in 2005, yet public opinion remained sharply split, with many continuing to question his behavior around children. Against that backdrop, Jackson's appearance in Epstein-related photographs reignited long-standing discomfort. Among the images released are photos showing Jackson in the company of Epstein, as well as another photograph featuring Jackson alongside former U.S. President Bill Clinton and Ghislaine Maxwell. In that image, several children appear with their faces redacted. Reports later indicated that the children were Jackson's own sons and the child of Diana Ross, but the redactions fueled speculation before clarification emerged. Jackson was never charged or convicted in relation to Epstein's crimes. There is no evidence that he participated in Epstein's trafficking activities. Still, the optics unsettled many observers because they intersected with an already controversial history. Timing matters here. Jackson's legal battles over child abuse allegations occurred around the same period Epstein first faced criminal investigation. Although the cases were unrelated, the overlap in era and the visual association created a narrative link that many found difficult to ignore. Supporters argue that Jackson's acquittal should have ended speculation. They point out that Epstein cultivated relationships with hundreds of high-profile figures, and that appearing in a photo does not imply shared behavior or knowledge. They also emphasize that Jackson's presence in the Epstein materials has been widely misinterpreted online, often stripped of clarifying context. Critics respond that acquittal does not erase concern. For them, the Epstein photos didn't introduce new accusations. They reopened old wounds. Jackson's lifelong closeness with children, his unusual boundaries, and the unresolved questions surrounding his behavior meant that any association with Epstein inevitably felt disturbing, even if unsupported by evidence. This is what makes Jackson's inclusion uniquely complex. He was legally cleared. He was culturally condemned. And he remains suspended between those two realities. In the Epstein files, Michael Jackson is not a proven participant, but a reminder of how suspicion can survive verdicts, especially when images outlive explanations. Continuing in the same careful, evidence-aware, non-accusatory investigative tone. Below are only number 4 and number 3, 500 words each, numbered headings, context first, no CTA yet, no channel name. Number 4. Donald Trump. Visibility, denials, and the weight of repetition. Few public figures appear in the Epstein materials as frequently, or as controversially, as Donald Trump. Unlike some names that surface only once or twice, Trump appears across multiple photos, references, and anecdotes spanning years. None of these images, on their own, show criminal behavior. But the sheer volume has made his inclusion especially scrutinized. Trump has long acknowledged that he knew Jeffrey Epstein socially in the 1990s and early 2000s, particularly in Palm Beach. He has described Epstein as someone who liked beautiful women, a remark that later drew criticism for its tone. Trump has also stated that he cut ties with Epstein well before Epstein's later criminal cases became public. That distinction is important and often debated. Photos released from Epstein's estate show Trump posing with Epstein and groups of women, many of whose faces are redacted. Other images depict Trump alongside Ghislaine Maxwell, who was later convicted of sex trafficking in connection with Epstein. There are also records and documents that mention Trump's name multiple times, though inclusion in such files does not indicate guilt. Trump has denied any involvement in Epstein's crimes and has stated that he never visited Epstein's private island. No criminal charges related to Epstein have ever been brought against him. Still, critics argue that the frequency of Trump's appearances in the Epstein orbit raises questions about awareness, judgment, and proximity. Supporters counter that Trump was one of many high-profile figures Epstein courted socially, and that casual association should not be conflated with complicity. They also note that Epstein moved comfortably within elite circles. often without scrutiny, before his crimes were fully exposed. What complicates Trump's case further is politics. During his 2024 presidential campaign, Trump publicly suggested he would release the Epstein files. Yet, critics argue that disclosures under his influence have been incomplete, fueling speculation about motive and selective transparency. Supporters argue that releasing unverified material risks damaging innocent people through implication alone. In this sense, Trump's presence in the Epstein materials has become symbolic, not just of Epstein's access to power, but of how political identity shapes interpretation. To some, the images reinforce distrust of elites. To others, they illustrate how easily proximity can be weaponized. What remains undisputed is this: